Submitted for your approval. Submitted for your approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted for your approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted for your
Shadow.
approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted for your
Shadow.
approval.
Another dimension. Self.
Submitted for your
Shadow.
approval.
Another Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval.
The Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval.
The Twilight Zone.
Hello, hello, hello. You're listening to a podcast not only of sound, but also of mind. It's Time to Rewind is a podcast that takes a journey into a wondrous land of time loops, whose boundaries are that of imagination. Each episode, my guest and I explore these time loops, one loop at a time. This stop is Trapped in the Twilight Zone, and this is the second stop at 1961's Season 2, Episode 26, Shadow Play. Here with me once again is guest comedian and podcaster Alice Lauren. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. So this is, a much shorter episode than the last one. This is in this episode, we get to see a couple minutes of him repeating this dream with all the roles switched. So what did you think about this repetition? Because I know a lot of times in time loop movies, you get this repetition, but everything is almost exactly the same except for the main character.
Well, I've never seen one where like everybody changes, although this is really the first one where it's a dream. There were other reasonings for other things in other movies. And that's weird to even buy. I know we talked about it before about how, well, I think we talked about kind of who would play what characters kind of as we dream personally. But yeah, here, I mean, switching, everybody just switches. That's really strange. There are no rules to dreams, I guess. But yeah, I found that to be a very strange touch that everybody kind of switched roles, and it almost seemed like that kind of like blip of, oh gosh, when was it? Well, we see like the blip of like a character kind of flashing and they become somebody else, because we really didn't see what happened to the dream characters after you stop dreaming, but we just kind of really saw that entering the dream again sort of situation.
Yeah, which I actually didn't. That was, you did remind me of something that I did want to bring up, and I guess I can bring it up here. Like whenever he does, they do flip the switch. The phone call is made, but it was too late. And in his rant earlier, he says, you always call, but it's always too late. Can't you at least call one time on time, and maybe I won't die, and then I'll wake up instead. And once again, the phone call comes after the switch is flipped, and we don't see him die, but instead it jumps back to the scene with the DA and the press guy and the DA's wife. And I think it's interesting because things start disappearing, but the people don't disappear in this version. The clock disappears, the lamp disappears, and then it fades to black.
Yeah, I didn't see much change. Just seemed to kind of like, all right, into the dream again. So yeah, but I didn't really pick up on kind of the disappearing. I thought, at one point one of the men kind of like glitched almost. But yeah, that was definitely that was definitely unexpected for me.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting choice that they decided that they didn't have any of the people disappear. They had the stuff, like the inanimate objects start disappearing first, and then they switch to back to the beginning where it's focused on Adam Grant with his head in his hands, and then it pulls out and starts revealing the other characters, but they've all switched places, which I do think it ties into the title of this episode, which is called Shadow Play, where it is almost like it's a play, and all the actors are they're switching roles, which I know that doesn't happen very often um, in any sort of theatrical productions, at least not any that I'm aware of, not that I'm an expert or anything. But in this case, his jailmate that was across the hallway is now playing the judge. The crazy guy, like 2 cells down, ranting about his mother, is now his defense lawyer, and the press guy who was like the came in drunk to the DA's off or to the DA's home is now the jury foreman.
That does remind me, though, actually, because I remember, even in the beginning of this episode, where, and maybe it's because it was the 1960s, and maybe, gosh, I forgot what the show is called, but basically maybe that's how it always looked, but it really did look like, that courtroom really did look like a set. Like, I had this very strong, just feeling like, oh, this is supposed to look like, you know, actors on set. So I think it definitely having that set, that actors in a play quality added to it.
Like I'm not super familiar with the Twilight Zone either. I've watched, a handful of episodes. Like I haven't gone back and rewatched any of the classic episodes other than the ones that I'm covering here for this season. But I do think that it is more likely that it was just a sign of the era and the budget.
Yeah, potentially. Oh, it was Andy Griffith, I think. I work in a nursing home, so I'm always seeing these old, shows on there, and I know sometimes they watch like the Andy Griffith show, and it, even there, there it looks like you're just, having these built sets. Um, so yeah, I mean that definitely, the era definitely played into it, but it definitely added some character. It definitely added something to really being like, this doesn't even look like a real courtroom.
Yeah. And and I think it's interesting that he does pretty much behave almost exactly the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, like I feel like, wouldn't you, why would you scream? Why would, I mean, you probably have your head in your hands, anyways, obviously, but yeah, why would you even anything? You just kind of like, okay, great, here's my hands, I don't know, handcuff me or whatever. I don't think he was even handcuffed, but um, do whatever you want. It's just gonna happen, yeah. So yeah, it's interesting to kind of see how much he could control, and then, to really think about, I mean, even going to trying to get um, the DA to call the governor before 12 a.m. or 12:01 or whatever it was. I think about how fate really works, and obviously this is a dream world, but was there a way to convince him, hey, call right now, it's 8 p.m., call right now, that kind of thing? Or was it always kind of destined to be, nope, it is at, 12 a.m. that you're gonna decide, okay, that's fine, I'll call the governor. So
It's always going to be around 9 o'clock whenever the DA gets
or
enough,
9 o'clock.
and yeah, it gets to be around 9 o'clock where the DA has enough doubts that he comes to visit Adam in the jail, and then he always calls like right at midnight, right whenever it's not enough time to save him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there's no amount of, because he tries to kind of change his fate by, arguing and arguing and trying, and can't you understand? And it always, takes until midnight for him to be like, okay, that's it, I'm calling. So it's just interesting how fate works in this dream world that he
Yeah.
also controls. Yeah.
So is there? Let me ask you, if you were in this situation, like if you were having this dream, what what do you think would be the first thing that you would try uh, to change things so that basically you didn't wake up by getting killed in the electric chair? Because I assume they don't really spell it out exactly, but I think it's safe to assume that whenever he gets killed in the electric chair, that's when he wakes up. I guess he does say it because, he says, at midnight I'm going to be killed, and then you all are going to die because you're all part of my dream.
Right. Right. And I wonder if he feels pain, like, physical pain as well. I mean, I've, felt that. I mean, there are some things even in dreams, I mean, not to be, gross or anything, but if I have to go to the bathroom and I'm having a dream, it becomes incorporated into my dream, if if there was pain, like, I mean, like I was talking about in the last episode about, being bitten by a fox in my dream, and I woke up and exactly where that bite was hurting, which, I mean, I probably just, who knows what I did, I was 9, I don't know, but right, like you feel, you feel pain. He probably feels pain there as well. I mean, I think this was the one, or maybe this was the next episode where the DA says, "Why don't you just enjoy it?" or something like that. I mean, it pertains to both anyway, but
Yeah.
if you know what's gonna happen, just, lay back and enjoy it. I mean, he probably feels some sort of pain, and then it probably goes away, and it's just him in the courtroom.
Yeah, even if it's dream pain, it's still the experience of waking up from a nightmare that you died, which that's not exactly pleasant, especially if it's something that is happening to you every single night.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh. But to get back to the question of what would I do to try to, I mean, I guess trying to convince, um, I mean, I probably wouldn't rush the judges, whatever it is, not judges' chambers, but rush the judge and try to do anything. I mean, what are you really gonna do? Um, I don't know. I mean, if you just sit there and you don't say anything, I mean, if I like if I sat there and didn't say anything, like let's say the DA came in and I kind of didn't even try to convince, nothing, would he even make a call at all later on? I mean, it wouldn't save me, but maybe that would be a change. I don't know.
Yeah, to me it seems like, based on what we see, the thing that works the most is the logical arguments.
Hmm.
How he talks about how things are happening in the dream that follow dream logic rather than reality logic, and pointing out those discrepancies. I feel like pushing that angle harder would do a better job of working.
Yeah, maybe, or like how or, I mean, even the really interesting, and I'm sorry, we're like getting back into the whole episode again, but pushing the whole, well, look at you, you have the successful career, this, I don't think they said beautiful wife, but this, this wife and, nice home, you never think, oh, maybe this is a dream, how did I get here? Or I'm having a horrible time, this is a nightmare, how did I get here? This can't be real. Really, I mean, that was kind of the, like, painful little real life thing, because you realize that's what people go through every day. If things are going well, they're like, I can't believe it, my life is a dream. If things are going horribly, they're like, this is a nightmare, I need to get out of this nightmare. I mean, that was a very fascinating and painful real life lesson from this.
The last thing that I would kind of like to point out, and at least in this episode, since this is well, in theory a shorter episode, is the closing narration, which is, we know that a dream can be real, but whoever thought that reality could be a dream? We exist, of course, but how? In what way? As we believe, as flesh and blood human beings, or are we simply part of someone's feverish, complicated nightmare? Think about it, and then ask yourself, do you live here, in this country, in this world, or do you live instead in the Twilight Zone? And, I love these Rod Serling intros and outros. They're just they're written so great. And he has this cadence in his voice, which is so unnatural, but it fits perfectly with the Twilight Zone. It's almost kind of like almost like a William Shatner style pause, where he has a lot of these pauses, but it fits so naturally with what he's saying in the Twilight Zone. Do you agree?
Right.
I know you just watched the one episode, or well, technically
Yeah,
two
but I mean,
episodes.
yeah, I mean, I'd heard of him, so yeah, I mean, I definitely. But is he? I'm confused. He's an actor, and his name is Rod Serling, and he's kind of like narrating this fictional
He's basically
show.
the creator. He's the one that he wrote. Um, I'd say about 75% of the episodes for the Twilight Zone. And in the classic series, he was always the narrator. They would come in and have this opening narration and the closing narration. He's kind of like the guide, the one person that's in every episode. I don't think he did a lot of acting that I'm aware of. He's primarily known as like for the Twilight Zone, and I think he went on to do the Night Gallery, which is, extremely similar to the Twilight Zone.
Right, right. Yeah, it was so okay, so he's not really playing a character, he's kind of like the nonfiction, not character, but narrator, playing himself basically,
Right.
and then obviously, actors doing yeah. That's so fascinating. And I mean I love that ending narration as well. I mean that definitely grips me into watching more episodes.
Yeah, it also reminds me, like the way that he's explaining it, and it reminds me of like the concept of the Matrix, which that's a similar concept where it's not them trapped in a dream, but instead it's people trapped in this digital reality.
And it's too deep, it's too deep. But so then is that kind of the theme? I mean, because like the Twilight Zone, I think of like that being the theme, but is that's basically the thread throughout the entire show?
Well, it's more of an anthology, so every episode has like it is completely different. It's typically they're all like kind of horror-esque, like sci-fi, um, basically like short stories. They typically
Yeah.
have some sort of either horror element or a twist at the end, but each episode has all the characters are all different. They're all completely different stories that aren't connected to each other whatsoever.
Yeah. They're not like all like Matrix, like it's okay, it's all different.
Yeah.
Something like stuck in the Matrix, stuck in the Twilight Zone, that is just a bunch of short stories about being stuck in the Twilight Zone. So
Yeah, pretty much.
yeah.
Well, I think that's all I have for this episode, unless there was anything else that you wanted to say about the 1961 version before we move on to the 1985 version of this story.
Yeah, no, I think I'm more excited about the 1985 version.
Yeah, me too. I think that brings in a lot of interesting differences that's going to be fun to talk about. But once again, I'd like to thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
And once again, why don't you go ahead and remind everybody where they can find you online?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at PodSocialite. My TikTok is Podcast Socialite. My Facebook is Alice Lauren, and I'm on a million billion podcasts about movies, about music. Just come find me, message me, talk to me. Let's be friends.
As always, I am Bubbawheat, and you can find me at flightstights@movienights.com. You can find me on Twitter at Bubbawheat. You can find this show, It's Time to Rewind, on Anchor.fm, as well as anywhere else where you listen to podcasts. We also have a Facebook group, It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group, where you can join and talk about episodes as they come out, or you can also share memes or talk about time loop movies, time loop TV shows, and time travel in general. And pretty much everything's welcome. And I also have a Patreon if you want to support this show and get access to episodes early, as well as vote on what movies and TV shows I might cover for future seasons. You can join that at patreon.com/Flights, Tights, and Movie Nights. And the $3 level is where you get access to the podcast, to early episodes of the podcast. And if that grows more, I might have Patreon only episodes, but we'll see how that goes. So until next time, I'll still be here, trapped in the Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval. Submitted for your approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted
Light.
for your approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted
Light.
for your
Shadow.
approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted
Light.
for your
Shadow.
approval.
Another dimension. Self.
Submitted
Light.
for your
Shadow.
approval.
Another Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval.
The Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval.
The Twilight Zone. Think about it. And then ask yourself, do you live here in this country, in this world? Or do you live instead in the Twilight Zone?